Well, do you ever play that game in the playground with your friends? The one where someone turns their back and the others sneak up on them when they're not looking? That's what it's like with Mr Longfingers.
We played a game when I was growing up called 1, 2, 3 red light. You would turn around and count to 3, and if somebody was moving, they would get called out. It was a weird little game. If you couldn't tell by now, I'm a huge fan of storytelling. You know, whether it's an animation, a narration, an illustration, or just some pictures to kind of help your imagination along, it really helps figure out and picture what you're thinking about as the narration plays out. Now, animations are my favorite, clearly, especially when they're in great quality. And storytelling in itself is such a fine art, as some people do it really well. My grandfather, on my mom's side, we called him Papa because Cajuns have all sorts of crazy nicknames for their aunts, uncles, grandparents, whatever. We always have these little nicknames, and my Papa would always tell me stories when I was young, and that's probably where my love for storytelling came. Everybody can appreciate a good story, but a lot of people like me like them because of special reasons like this. So this story today, I don't know much about it, but I know it's about a grandmother that tells her grandson a lot of stories. Probably scary knowing that this is a horror channel. It's by Nightmare Tales. Make sure to head on over to their channel, guys, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell, and if you like reaction videos, make sure to subscribe to my channel as well. Let's get into the animation. Mr. Longfingers.
My grandma used to tell me scary stories when I was little.
Okay.
There's one I'll never forget.
Oh,
I was 10 years old when Grandma came to live with us.
Oh.
It was about 6 months after Granddad had passed away, and I guess, looking back, she must have been lonely in that big house of theirs, rattling around with only the grief and the memories her company. So despite a few protests from my mum, my parents took her in. There were no protests from me, none at all. Grandma was loud and fun, and I loved her. She had almost an unlimited supply of candy, and she'd always slip me a couple whenever she saw me.
I love spoiling my little nephew with candy, y'all. Grandmas and grandpas do that often. You know, my papa, he passed on. So did my mama, his wife. My grandmother and my grandfather both passed, but my grandfather went first. And I remember my grandmother being a very harsh lady almost all of her life. She was always stern and real rigid, and she yelled at my papa a lot. But when my papa was sick, like on his deathbed, I saw a side of my mama that I'd never forget. She softened up a whole lot, and she didn't last much longer after my papa passed, and probably because she died of a broken heart. You know, a lot of people say that's a thing. You know, I couldn't imagine going on without my wife, especially at that age. You know, when you've been living with someone so long and you're just used to their company, and all of a sudden they're gone. I think I'd have to move in with some loved ones too, because the thought of the day-to-day activities changing that much overnight and you just dealing with the grief, it's pretty hard to swallow, to tell you the truth. Not to get all morbid, but anyway, Grandma's giving the grandson some candy.
She was always the first to stick up for me when I got in trouble too. But it was her stories that I loved best.
All right, now we
Grandma had lots of scary stories.
Scary stories.
And most of the stories I'd laugh off or forget about not long after she was done telling them.
Right.
But there were a couple that really did spook me a bit.
Okay.
I was only 10 at the time, you have to understand. And Grandma certainly knew how to bring the stories to life.
Mm-hmm.
She'd shut off the lights in my room so only the glow of the night sky shone through the curtains, and she'd shuffle in real close.
Wow.
Close enough so I could see the wrinkles on her face and smell her evening cup of tea on her breath. Close enough so her deep blue eyes could stare straight into mine.
Wow, she was trying to get that.
She must have given me nightmares with a few of those tales. But now, years later, there's only one that I can still remember.
Okay.
Only one that's stuck with me. The story about the shower and Mr. Longfingers.
All right, so when I was growing up, the stories that my papa told me, I don't remember any of them either. What I do remember is staying the night over there very often. I would like to go spend time at my grandparents' house. My aunts and my uncles used to go visit there as well. We'd have big sleepovers and movie nights. So we'd get the VCR tapes, you know, and the rewinders and all this stuff, right? And my aunts and uncles like to watch horror shows. It freaked me out, guys. I had night terrors for years because I watched too many horror movies before I was ready for them. And it was a crazy time in my life. I remember sleeping with a 60-watt bulb on in my room and stuff because these movies would affect me. So Papa never told me scary stories, but these movies, man, they made an impact on me big time.
Grandma told me about Mr Longfingers one night after I asked about her baths.
Okay.
Grandma used to love her baths. She'd spend ages in them, light candles and incense,
Wow.
and lie in the tub humming to herself until the water turned cold.
Sounds like my
It
wife.
drove my mum crazy. But when I asked her why she loved them so much, she said it was the only place that she could relax. It was the only place that was safe for her to relax.
Safe?
You know, people like me who are, well, more sensitive to certain things, we have to take baths, she told me seriously one night, shuffling closer on the bed.
Is Grandma medium?
I couldn't possibly spend that long in the shower. It'd be far too risky. Grandma stared at me with those blue eyes of hers,
Okay.
unsmiling.
Well, more, you
And I knew it
freaking
was
me
time
out.
for one of her stories, one of the scary ones. I shivered with pleasure and pulled the covers up to my chin.
All right.
Why is it risky, Grandma? She half turned to look out the window, watching me from the corner of her eye, pausing for effect. I waited, feeling my heart rate pick up ever so slightly in my chest. Well, she said after a moment, it's only risky if you close your eyes, of course. If you close your eyes for longer than 10 seconds.
10 seconds?
What do you mean? Why? Well, do you ever play that game in the playground with your friends? The one where someone turns their back and the others sneak up on them when they're not looking?
Like Boo the
I
Ghost?
nodded, and Grandma nodded back.
That was 1, 2, 3 red light.
Exactly. So that's what it's like in the shower when you have your eyes closed. That's what it's like with Mr Longfingers.
We played a game when I was growing up called 1, 2, 3 red light. That's basically what it was. You would turn around and count to 3, and then turn around and everybody had to freeze. And if somebody was moving, by the time you turned around, they would get called out. It was a weird little game. I don't even remember how it worked completely, but that was a very common thing. It was like Boo the Ghost from Mario. That's kind of where it came from, like the Mario games, maybe. Anyway, this Longfingers sounds kind of like that, maybe, but the shower. I don't know what it has to do with the shower yet.
A cold itch tickled my back. Who's Mr Longfingers, Grandma?
Who?
She let out a deep breath, as if she wished she hadn't said anything, and turned her head back to face mine. When she next spoke, she lowered her voice. No one knows exactly, Grandma whispered. Some think it's a creature that's attracted to the heat and the smell we give off in there. Others think it's a demon that finds its way into our realm through the dense steam clouds.
Wow.
No one can say for sure, because the only ones who have actually seen Mr Longfingers aren't ever going to be able to tell you. I pulled in a breath. Why not? Grandma shuffled closer along the bed and leaned towards me, leaving my question hanging in the air. Don't you worry about it, sweetheart. Don't worry your pretty head. As long as you remember the rules, you'll be fine.
Momo.
What rules?
What rules?
Well, when you're in the shower, you try not to close your eyes for too long.
All right.
5 seconds is fine, and 10 is just about okay too.
All right.
But any longer than that, yeah, then what? Well, any longer than that, and you may just start to feel something in the room with you.
All right.
Something watching. And if you ever go longer than 15 seconds, that's when you might start to hear a noise too.
All right.
Hear what? The soft tap, tap, tap of fingers on glass.
Oh no.
Fingers drumming against the glass door of the shower. If you do ever hear that noise, God forbid, will you make me a promise?
What?
What, Grandma? Promise me you'll never open your eyes.
What? Okay. So I have a shower curtain, first of all. Shower doors are nice, I ain't gonna lie. But we had some problems with it on the rails, and we ended up getting frustrated and taking them off. To make a long story short, we don't have a shower door. But if anybody or if anything ever tapped on the shower doors when I had my eyes closed, I'd freak out, yo. I don't think I could fight butt naked. You're gonna catch me in the shower. I am a complete victim if I'm naked, okay? butt naked and slippery, I'm pretty much dead. You come after me with a spoon, I'm dead. You don't need much of a weapon. You can probably take me down. I don't know what I do to defend myself. What do you cover when when somebody's about to get murdered? And then Longfingers, I just want to cover up all my orifices, y'all. Some stuff.
I barely slept that night. Hardly at all. I'd close my eyes and try to relax, but every time I did, I'd imagine a face pressed against my bedroom window, staring in at me. And when I did finally get to sleep, I had nightmares. Bad ones.
God.
I had them all week, in fact.
Right.
Dreams about disembodied eyes watching me in the dark, and long fingers reaching out to touch my exposed skin.
Yeah.
It wasn't any better when I was awake either. Not really. The shower was the worst.
Oh, I guess.
That's when Grandma's story really got to me.
Yeah?
I'd never thought about it before, but suddenly I had trouble shutting my eyes in there.
Oh, of course.
I'd be standing beneath the beating water, shampoo running down my face, and as soon as I squinted my eyelids closed, I'd hear Grandma's words running through my head. 5 seconds is fine, and 10 is just about okay too.
Wow.
But any longer than that, I'd rub my hair fast, feeling the shampoo dripping off my chin, and as soon as I'd counted past 5 seconds, I'd feel it, a sort of pressure. Not a feeling of being watched exactly, but something close to that. I'd run my fingers faster and faster through my hair, frantically trying to get the suds out, and the ready blackness behind my closed eyes, coupled with the rush of water in my ears, would feel like a held breath.
Wow.
Like the silence before a scream. The seconds would race through my mind, and I'd be so desperate to open my eyes again that sometimes I'd do it before my hair was rinsed fully clean, and my eyes would sting with shampoo.
That's why you gotta get the tilt going on, man. You gotta get the tilt right here. See, you just let the water run on the back of your head, and you just yeah. You know what I'm saying, guys. I did that before I was ready to close my eyes and get shampoo. I was always scared of soap getting in my eyes, not because my papa told me any scary stories about long-fingered people tapping on the shower doors, just in general, you know. And now, I don't know if I shut my eyes for that long a period of time. I don't have a whole lot of hair anymore. I used to, but not anymore. So I can get the soap out pretty quick, I think.
But before I shut them again, I'd always be sure to peer out through the steamed glass door of the shower cubicle.
Of course.
Just to make sure
Checking.
I was still alone.
Fingers.
I was a wreck. And my mother knew it. And she cursed at my grandma for telling me these stories.
Oh.
Grandma came to visit me in my room the following night. At that time, as she perched on the end of my bed, there were no stories. Nothing like that. Grandma just sat there and stared down at me, her blue eyes wide and sad. The light from the moon outside my window lit up her wrinkled face.
Why are you sad, Momo?
You know, I'd never let anything bad happen to you, don't you? She said after a moment. I nodded my head. I know, Grandma. You know, I wouldn't let you come to any harm. I nodded again.
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's good. She looked away from me for a moment, out the window. You know, the things I tell you in the evening are meant to help you, sweetheart. They're meant to toughen you up a bit, protect you. She paused and shook her head. But maybe your mum's right. Maybe I went too far this time.
So, at the beginning, they kind of said that that the mother was reluctant to let Grandma move in with them. So I guess it was his dad's mom. It could be really, like, he was excited at the beginning about Grandma living with them. But honestly, having a live-in guest, especially someone's parent in a household, it's got to create a lot of pressure, right? I could see my mom coming over to my house and living there or living here. And then I could see my wife's mom coming over to live here. And I could think about both scenarios and be like, that would create a lot of attention, of tension. You know, I love my mom and I really love my mother-in-law too. Living with people is completely different than spending time with them or whatever, you know, especially parents. They tend to have a parental thing that happens, and they try to instruct their kids that are now grown and have families of their own, and it could be really it could create some unnecessary and undue pressure in relationships. I think that seems kind of crazy to think about.
She looked down at me and smiled. But even then, even though I was only 10 years old, I could tell it didn't quite reach her eyes. I'll tell you what, Grandma said. You know what I told you about Mr Longfingers and the shower?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to make sure you're safe. I'll scare the bastard off. How about that? It won't come back in a hurry if it has to face me.
Okay.
I stared up at Grandma, watching her face glow in the moonlight, and watching her smile down at me.
So is she trying to
I
comfort
nodded my head.
him about his nightmares?
I was the one who found her. I don't know when exactly it happened, but I guess it was about a week after we had that talk in my room.
Oh no.
A week after she told me she wouldn't let me come to any harm. I woke early that morning from a bad dream to a heavy thumping sound. I sat bolt upright in bed. My room was quiet around me, and I couldn't hear anything from the wall that joined my parents' room either. But the house wasn't entirely silent. Floating down the hall, muffled by my closed door, I could hear the sound of rushing water,
It's an intimate from Minecraft.
the noise of the shower. I leapt out of bed and ran down the upstairs hallway, my heart already pounding in my chest.
Oh no.
As soon as I reached the closed bathroom door, I started banging on it. A deep terror was welling up inside me like cold water from a well, something I couldn't place, and I kept banging and shouting, "Grandma!" over and over again, even though she didn't respond. Off to my right, I was dimly aware of the voices from my parents' room, the sleepy shuffle of footsteps, but before they had a chance to make it out onto the landing, I'd lifted my hand to test out the door handle, more out of instinct than because I thought it might actually open. But the door wasn't locked. I kept banging with my free hand and swung it suddenly inwards, bringing me face to face with a wall of steam.
Right.
Heat struck my skin. I squinted my eyes against the damp fog and peered into the bathroom. And before Dad pushed me to one side, before everything around me descended into shouting and tears and chaos, I saw her. I saw Grandma. She was lying naked on the floor in the shower cubicle, the water beating down all around her, blue eyes bulging from her face. One hand was curled around her chest like a dead bird, while the other trailed against the glass of the shower cubicle, the flailing finger marks she'd carved through the steams, still clear and fresh.
Did she have a heart attack?
It was a heart attack
Longfingers?
that killed her.
A heart attack?
That's what my dad told me. He said Grandma was old, and the thing had struck her quickly and suddenly. She would have died fast and without pain, Dad said. She wouldn't have suffered.
Huh.
I knew better though. Even as a 10-year-old kid, I knew better.
What?
And years later, as an adult, I still know better. It's because all those years ago, when I crept back into the still hot bathroom after the paramedics had taken Grandma's body downstairs, I made sure to check the marks her fingers had carved through the steamed glass of the shower cubicle. And those marks weren't just on the inside.
Oh, wow. It was Mr. Longfingers. Dang, man. That was such a great story, though. Like, the storytelling that Nightmare Tales does is so descriptive. It's always got perfect music. The animation quality is always excellent. And the stories themselves are really, really good. This made me think a lot about my grandparents and storytelling and stuff like that. That's one of the reasons that I really love these stories, man. Maybe you got some memories of your own that you could share in the comment section below. I'd love to hear some of your stories about these type of stuff as well, guys. I hope y'all really enjoyed it. Make sure to check out Nightmare Tales. His link's going to be right here and in the description, as well as a couple other videos that I reacted to him from here. Always a great story from him. Thanks so much for watching, guys. As always, this is Zueljin signing off, and we'll see you next time.